On behalf of the Wakefield Human Rights Commission, welcome. We're so glad you're able to come. This is a very special evening. And as is traditional, we always begin our functions with a reading of a land acknowledgement. And my co-commissioner, Jill, is going to read the land acknowledgement. Come on in. Welcome.
The Wakefield Human Rights Commission acknowledges that the lands we now call Wakefield are the ancestral homelands of the Massachusetts people, who have been the caretakers of the unceded land for centuries and will continue to be for centuries to come. We are settlers. The Massachusetts people have been tirelessly striving for human rights, even in the face of land theft, genocide, and forced removal. The work we do to build a more unified, equal, and diverse community grows out of the efforts, leadership, and guidance of countless Native communities. We commit to honoring this continued Native activism as we do our work. In doing so, we dedicate time in our meetings throughout the year to help educate those in the community about the Native people of Massachusetts, past, present, and their work towards the future. We stand with the Massachusetts Indigenous legislative agenda in celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day in place of Columbus
Okay. Before this program begins, I just want to tell you a bit about our next program. Most of you know this is Hispanic Heritage Month, and we have a program that we're co-sponsoring with the library and the Galvin Middle School's Amigo Club. It's an author talk. It's by Jennifer DeLeon, and her book is called Don't Ask Me Where I'm From. And so that's going to be on October 30th. It's going to be at the Galvin Middle School Library, and it starts at 6 o'clock, so be bigger. And tonight, I am very delighted, excited to introduce our guest speaker. Charlie Nauru is part of the Baracantano tribe, and people thought that tribe was gone. They were the initial tribe, one of the initial tribes that Columbus met, and they are definitely not gone. They still exist beautifully, and she's going to give you a sense of the history, the myth, and ceremonies, and in the end, there's going to be dancing, and I hope you all will dance with us.
Taiwei di ituno kena di ituno dia tia uno diri chali naru porike taino taka kena sabo taka. Now I wanted to start in my traditional language because it's not Spanish. And yes, because we're from the Caribbean, yes, Boriquén, the original name of Puerto Rico, and because we speak Spanish, everyone thinks that that's our traditional language, that's our first language. It is not. Can anyone tell me what I just said in my language? That's okay, Columbus couldn't either. What I said was, good evening, my brothers and sisters. My name is Chani Naru, Boriquén Taino. I am a Boriquén Taino descendant, and I represent the United Confederation of Taino people. I am also a member of the Guainía Taino tribe. Okay. I want to thank Wakefield Human Rights Commission for this opportunity to share a bit of my culture, my history, and ancestry. That just might be yours as well as you listen and connect to me, to my culture in some way. I've learned what I've learned over the years through the US educational system or on my own personal journey along with working closely and being around Indigenous peoples. But really tracing back my lineage, little things that my grandmother would say to me, my elder cousins who were more like uncles, was enough for me to go back in my time. So with that being said, let's talk about Caribbean. Let's talk about Caribbean Indigenous peoples, the introduction to Taino culture. I'm gonna go by slide. I have my notes here, so I will be explaining each slide. I'm gonna read it. It just makes it a little bit simpler for you to understand. And by the way, I'm also here with my son, Vinny Tataniki. He's not dressed yet, but he will be. I hope everybody can see, yes? now, let's talk a little bit about this region. This is the region that we're going to focus on, the Greater Antilles. The Greater Antilles area, which have the islands like Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico being the slave name is Boriquén, okay? The Dominican Republic, again, that's not its real name, it's Quisqueya, Haiti, and all these lesser Antillean islands. We'll be touching a bit more of that region as a whole. Oftentimes, when you talk about culture, what I've seen over the years, there's a tendency to kind of isolate things and put things in a box and not see it as really connected to everything around you. So if you really look at this map, you can see these islands were not in isolation at all. There are no walls here. So where you see no walls, there's no borders, which also indicates travel, navigation throughout those waters, throughout the Caribbean. People recording history, of course, all throughout time, just in different ways. It's the way it's been told and still told today that the misunderstandings or misinterpretations occur. There was a lot of interchange during these times, and because of those no walls, those no borders, there was a lot of exchange between island after island. When we talk about Caribbean, usually what comes to mind, you see here, the beaches, Carnaval, the movie, Pirates of the Caribbean. And why not? It's tropical weather, it's great for vacation. It's cold over here. Carnaval is fun, it's exciting, the outfits worn, they're like, holy cow, amazing. But there's so much more deeper history than just what you see in modern day. It really starts with this guy. Does anybody know who this guy is?
Columbus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but do we really know that? It could be. Does anyone really know what he really looks like?
No.
Well, Columbus, this is the reality. We really don't know who people are at some times. It just goes to show how things are shown, portrayed, and how we absorb the information fed to us. Imagery speaks volumes for us. The way I like to think about it in this history, in this historical context, I say BC, before Columbus. I want to focus on this image here because this is where it all started 500 years ago. We all have heard the tune, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but you don't hear about what happened there. The minute you hear the name Columbus, the first thing that comes to mind is that little jingle. How he discovered America. He did not. The greatest navigator. Not so much. So, what can you see from this image? What can anyone tell me about this image? Just take a quick look at it. Anybody?
Where are the indigenous people?
I'm sorry?
Where are the indigenous people?
That's amazing. That's exactly what I wanted you to say. Because they're over here,
Oh, wow.
hidden. You can't see them. So this depiction is really offensive because he's here. There's the ships there. He's coming onto our shores, claiming our shores. But what about us? We were already here. So remembering the prior slide where my ancestors were already navigating the waters thousands of years before trade. So our indigenous peoples were already navigating waters thousands of years before Columbus. We were already, like in that prior slide where you see no borders, we were already sailing across those lands time and time and time again, all the way up to the southern tip of Florida. And the southern tip of Florida, that island for us is called Bimini. So we were already there way before this ever happened. In this image, can someone tell me what you see? Anybody?
Religion starting to show up at the monk.
Yeah, yeah. And if you look, the natives are here in this little corner. You could barely see them. Again, which goes to the invisibility. You hear Columbus' story, but you barely hear about who he met when he discovered, or he was discovered lost at sea. Here you see bigwigs claiming the lands as their own. Natives aren't seen. How about those people over here in the right corner? They're hard to see, and it was intended to be that way. Our people to them were savages. We meant nothing. We were invisible. I'm going to stay here for a quick second. So I just wanted to also say that this painting that you're seeing has been redone so many times throughout the years. And you can see it's modified slightly in this stamp, where the indigenous are so small almost to seem like children, not important. It goes for our erasure. Okay, so indigenous peoples. Who are indigenous peoples? This isn't per se a legal binding definition, but more of working definition. At the United Nations level, that's what they call indigenous peoples. The links indigenous peoples to colonization and what that means is peoples that were there pre-invasion. Indigenous communities, peoples, and nations are those that, having a historical continuity with pre-invasion and pre-colonized societies that developed on their territories, consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the societies now prevailing in those territories or parts of them. Here's a few examples, the words used to describe indigenous peoples. Amerindian, which are English-speaking Caribbean and English-speaking South American like Guyana. Amerindian, Native Americans, North American Native peoples, Aboriginal peoples, First Nations. So all this links to the concept of indigenous peoples. So when you hear me say that, you keep in mind that this is what we're talking about, all in the Caribbean context. So what happens? There's a new world encounter. With indigenous peoples, oftentimes you get this image. The indigenous giving something, or vice versa. You'll see some sort of trinket, beads, or piece of glass, etc. This is one of the ways they, the colonizers, are presented even at the early stages of education. Basically, here's the story. Columbus came, landed, discovered the land. There were Indians there. Seeing. On to the next subject. That's because that's all they think kids can handle. There's a whole lot of other things that happen there. But usually in this context, they connect it to the Columbian Exchange. Now, if you could see, when you're growing up and you're reading the textbooks and you're learning in schools, you know, all the sharing, it goes way back to like we're here in Massachusetts with the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag Nation, and you see the feasting and it was hunky-dory and happy-go-lucky and they were having, that's not what happened. But this started thousands of years before that even happened. So this was occurring for so long, and people getting this misconception that the colonizers treated the indigenous well. No, that's not the case. so the Columbian Exchange is the widespread transfer of plants, animals, culture, human populations, technology, and ideas between the Americas and the Old World in the 15th and 16th centuries, related to European colonization and trade after Christopher Columbus' 1492 voyage. It keeps it mellow, doesn't really get into subsidies or subtleties of the movement. Columbian Exchange because of the no borders and no walls throughout the region, we were able to get that exchange. So it's one of those things where, yes, the atrocities happen, but for every good, there's a bad. So this was good out of that bad. Corn is like the biggest export of this side of the world, and it's been instituted all over the world. If you travel to the Himalayas, up into Nepal, there you'll find different varieties of corn, which they never had before. So why is this image important? Maize. It was the indigenous peoples that developed the corn, and with that, transported all over the world. This impacts the world in a huge way. What happened in the Caribbean changed the face of the planet. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit more deeper subject about Columbus. Here's some quotes from Columbus when he came. Right in the beginning, he describes, as a paradise on earth, the Caribbean, trees all along the river, beautiful and green and different from ours, with flowers and fruits, each according to their kind, many birds and little birds which sing very sweetly. So free with all they possess that no one would believe it without having seen it. Of anything they have, if you ask for them, if you ask them for it, they never say no. Rather, they invite the person to share it and show as much love as if they were giving their hearts. I certify to your highnesses that in the world I believe that there are no better people nor better land. They love their neighbors as themselves and have a speech that is sweetest in the world and mild and always laughing. Who do you think that he was describing? Anybody?
The Native American.
The Taino people, my ancestors. That's what he was talking about. Every time I do this presentation and I see this and I read it, it's like getting hit in the stomach each and every time. He tells this, it's written, it's physically written in his log, how our people addressed him, how our people showed him and taught him and accepted him and his crew, and what happened to our people after that, that subjugation is absolutely horrifying. Always puts a lump in my throat. Why did he say that? Well, it's obvious. Look at our lands. It's beautiful. Puerto Rico. Everybody loves to go to Puerto Rico. Boriquen. Quisqueya, Dominican Republic. Jamaica, Cuba. It's rich in agriculture. Remember why many people want to vacation to the Caribbean. Look at this image. We're talking about lush green environment that has a year-round growing system with average temperatures in the 80s, and that includes a water temperature. You can see the mountain range, and where all the mountains there's a lot of rain. What do we get from that? Fresh water. You see, that's why Columbus spoke the way he did about what his encounter was like. The environment was a reflection of the people. The people were so giving because Mother Earth is so giving. There was always plenty for everyone. Again, BC, before Columbus, I just want to remind you that the Caribbean was already a hub before the arrival of Columbus and his crew, with many different cultures exchanging and interacting over thousands of years. Remember the no walls. So people were coming from South America. You have our Arawak and Carib relatives, as well as the Mesoamerican folks, Mayas, Mexicas from Central America. There was even travel and exchange to the southern tip of Florida, like I said earlier, Bimini. You can see all the areas where this stuff was happening, the Kalinago, Caribbean, etc. That's where we get the name Caribbean, so from the Caribs. So if you look really closely, there was so much exchange from all of these areas up and down the Caribbean through the coast thousands of years before Columbus. Many ask, how are we able to do this? And I say, we, because my ancestors. How are we able to do this? How are we able to get around? Well, by this. Do anybody can tell me what that is?
Canoe.
That's a canoe. So you just spoke a Taino word, because canoe, canoa, is Taino. It's an Arawak word. It is not Spanish. They use their, I said this word earlier, ingenuity. This is my ingenuity right here because I didn't have a podium. So we use whatever we can use to make things work. So this is my podium. So we use our ingenuity to create a watercraft called canoa. The canoa, the canoe, is actually another Taino word that has been adopted by the Spanish and still used today. That's where it came from. These canoes were built in ways that one alone can hold 150 people. Back then, our people were eating off the land. Everything came from Mother Earth. So no such things as preservatives and substitutes. Definitely no Mickey D's. And I need to lay off that Mickey D's. Our people were healthy and fit, always farming, fishing, hunting, working hard, building these canoas and bohíos. And bohíos are the word for homes. And trading throughout the region. Along with fishing, one other major food source was turtle eggs. No person is perfect, but through years knowledge grew, and with that, so did the villages. Back then, sea turtles were everywhere, and so large that 4 men could fit inside one shell. Nowadays, you're lucky if you see one due to climate change, pollution, etc. If a turtle came up and laid eggs, the indigenous would take a few, but leave some behind so that the turtle would come back again and lay more. That was their way of thinking. So the turtle would come, lay whatever, 50 eggs. They'll take only what they needed. They were never greedy. They would leave the rest, turtle would go, come back, and it just kept food. Here you can see the ways of interaction amongst the families. Cooking, arts, culture, ceremonies, dance. This is a bohíos that I was saying. This is called the longhouse, the cane, and that's where the chief would be. And then over here is where the games were played. The bate is where the activities happen. That's the bate. It was a circular space, usually surrounded by stone wall. A cane, the long house, is where the chief would be. Another thing I want to share is the fact that the people also intermarried with other chiefdoms. During the travels and trade, our people learned to speak different dialects to communicate. The word relative is dear to us as it expresses how we're all interconnected. Everyone learned from one another in order to set the tone for the future generations. Now, communities are building up and continuously growing. Territories start to form, and that's what happened here. Over here in the island of Hispaniola, Quisqueya, so Dominican Republic, 5 tiny little territories, and within them, you have many villages, each with its own chief or chiefdom. They have hierarchy, administration for their functions, but under that, they keep going almost to what people have, a democracy. Then they have another chief, a council meeting, a chief who oversees the admins of these whole territories. Over here, you have Boriquén, Puerto Rico. Over 20 at a time that Columbus came. Columbus kind of passed the island around 1493, but he didn't go over there to settle. Puerto Rico doesn't get settled till 1508. This is here to show you that there definitely was a form of governance. When you have many unified territories, chiefs, there's strategies that made for coexisting. There may have been some unpleasantries, but not an all-out war. Hence why Columbus didn't record them being actively at war or hating one another. There is no documentation whatsoever on any log anywhere that says anything about a war. Since we're talking about chiefs here, I also want to point out that in our tiny little community, chiefs are male or female. We call them cacique, which means covered by the sun. Spaniards were not used to seeing women in leadership, so that threw them off. I mean, coming from a lifestyle and philosophy where everything is focused on male, God, the Father, God transferred power to the king, who is a male. Then men lead the household, so on and so forth. Now, our nation is matrilineal. We run it. Now, in Taino philosophy, the creation and the beginning of the movement starts with female energy. Atabe, that's our Mother Earth, our deity. That Atabe is who gives birth to the sun. It starts with female. It's only logical. I mean, don't we all come from a woman? Here you can see a gathering called an areto. So later on, we're gonna do a little dance, and it's gonna kind of look like an areto, but the words that it's gonna be is gonna be a call and response. So when we're dancing, I'm gonna say areto, and you say areto, and what that means is gathering. That's how they would have their fun and share space. When we're at powwow, we do a lot of that. Some more of the bate, the circle where the activities occur. This is an actual bate. This is literally in Puerto Rico, and it was dug up by an archaeologist. And it's there to this day. This site is called Caguana. You can go there, physically see the bate. Here also is where the games called Batu are held. This is a sport kind of like a fusion of soccer and basketball. One must use their body to get the ball through the hole, so feet, legs, hips, look, ma, no hands. So the Batu is played a lot in South America today, and you have a ball and there's stone, and it's kind of like basketball, but protruding from the stone is this hole. And if you think about Harry Potter, kind of like in that movie when they're trying to get they're flying on their brooms and trying to get the ball through there. It's similar to that, but you can't, you're using your hip, your feet, and other body parts that is just, ouch. It's not easy, it's not for the faint, let me tell you. I have a sister that actually plays, and I think she's broken everything so far. Okay, so now what's interesting about this is when it was played, the Batu, when it was played. The game was used as a form of court and justice. So when you have two chiefdoms that are like, they're arguing, oh, this one, da-da-da-da, this one, da-da-da-da. And here we have a court, we go to the front of the judge, and there's the plaintiff and the defendant. Well, here, they play Batu. Whoever wins, that's it. That was court adjourned. So now you're looking at some artifacts. They're constructed by Taino, along with singing and dancing. They're also artists. So these are stone sculptures. Each one of these represents certain things, but we'll get into that later because each one is a whole different. They represent deities and directions, and that's a whole other story. But at least you can see them. They have, it's the intricacies and the use of ivory inlay. This right here, these are actual teeth, ancestral teeth. Now these are wood sculptures. But wood sculptures are very scarce because wood breaks down faster and harder to preserve. So if we do have a wood sculpture and it's like in really good condition, it's very rare. It's priceless at that point. And over here you have, this actually was made with real ivory, real teeth. And there is a Taino sister of mine that literally made a replica of this because she crochets. So she crocheted this doll to appear to look like this one. And then this is for ceremonial practices. Everything you're seeing here is for ceremonial practices. This is called a duho. And this is our cacique's, our chief's throne. Whenever we're in a circle or wherever we're in the gane, in the home, he sits there as he talks about whatever it is that at that moment. So when we have ceremony, our chief is literally sitting on his duho and we sit there around the circle and we listen. And these are just more jewelry, more artifacts, plates. We used a lot of gourds to have like cups and bowls and things like that. Okay. So. Now we're gonna move on. So what happened to all that beautiful culture? Well, we're back to this guy, okay? Remember when he said how beautiful it was, all these people were so sweet? Well, what happened? It appears to me that people are ingenious and would be good servants, and I am of opinion that they would very readily become Christians as they appear to have no religion. Well, that changed quickly now, didn't it? Unfortunately, this is the part that is omitted from the history books. What he actually did to my ancestors once he realized that he could. In their eyes, they only saw savages, a people ready to be servants with no religion, no connection. But you just saw prior slides that there was culture. There was, I don't want to use the word religion, but there was spirituality, there was community, there was no savagery there. With 50 men, I could subjugate them all and make them do everything that is required of me, or of them, sorry. Sure enough, that's what transpired. And for those little ones here, you know, any little, my little young folk, this is our reality. This actually happened. This isn't The Walking Dead. My ancestors' hands were cut off. They were cut off because why? They wanted gold. And if my ancestors didn't give them what they wanted, that was their punishment. Babies were ripped off their mother's arms and fed to their dogs. 13 men were hung and tortured at the time because 13 represented Jesus and the 12 apostles. Women were assaulted, beaten. Girls as young as 9 were sold and passed around to do as they pleased. Remember, all this was done in the name of Jesus Christ. This is the truth that's been kept from all of us for generations. And it is a hard pill to swallow because they did use the Bible. They did use Jesus Christ as the reason why it was okay to torture and rape. Here are 2 images. The left is a depiction of the Spanish treachery against Cacique Anacaona, the Ayiti Quisqueya, Dominican Republic. It is recorded that the Spanish befriended the chief, but only to get close enough to commit heinous acts, as you see here. Burning the villages, and at the end, hanging the chief. Remember, they were not used to women in leadership. So what they did was say, hey, let's have a meeting with all your chiefs and let's talk about a treaty. 80 chiefs showed up. Tainos, thinking this was their way, and being the diplomatic people, agreed to this meeting in the longhouse, in the caney. And once they were all there, well, the image on the right is, once they were all there, they burned them down. So basically they just set up a meeting. It was a setup. They all ended up in there and then they just burned them all. The image on the right is a depiction of the cacique hacked away from Cuba. This is one of those times that makes you think, wow, how can this have happened? But it did. You see cacique tied to a stake. What you don't see is the entire village watching this happen. Cacique is told by the Spanish, if he converts to Christianity, that when he dies, he will go to the kingdom of heaven. Cacique replies, where do all your people go when they die? The Spanish replies, to heaven, of course. Cacique then says, well, let me burn. Cacique didn't want his soul to be anywhere these people who committed all these violent acts go. The entire village in all of their power screamed out his name, Hatue, 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 letting him know that they were there with him till the end. So this is factual. They wanted him to convert. He said no. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. But in his mind is, that's where heaven is. We're going to go to heaven because we're converting, you're burning us. And your people go in there too, and yet they're doing this to us. Why would I want to go there? People have a misconception that the Taino people didn't stand up for themselves and they just let this invasion happen. Well, that's farthest from the truth. Cacique Enriquillo was a Taino cacique who rebelled against the Spanish from 1519 to 1533. He achieved the first treaty between indigenous peoples and Europeans in the Western Hemisphere. What I want to point out here are their dates. Cacique rebelled against the Spanish from 1519 to 1533. If you look at the history books, they mention the Taino were extinct by this time. Here's proof again of that, another way of genocide. Anybody know what that's called? Paper genocide. That's how they just kill us out of the history, by just not writing us or telling the story in pen. 9 years later, the Queen of Spain made new laws called Laws of the Indians in 1542, after being petitioned by the people. During this time, what saved the Taino people was the fact that most left the Caribbean to Peru for gold. That was where a lot That was where a lot of it was found. They didn't come to the Caribbean to plant beans. They came to find gold. This was also the time that the transatlantic slave trade was happening, bringing over the enslaved Africans. Why? Well, they had to make up for the loss of the Indian slavery. So this is what was designed, this law, designed to protect Indians and restrain encomiendos, prohibited Indian slavery, prohibited new encomiendos, inheritance of the old ones, provoked rebellion in Peru. Now this is really funny here because within those new laws, the Spanish were slick. They were able to find a loophole. So what do you see here in this depiction of Pirates of the Caribbean? What is he running from?
Indigenous people.
Yeah, but why? Why do you think? Cannibalism. Okay, so the Spaniards, that loophole is they decided to tell everybody that the natives were cannibals. There's no proof of that ever, documented ever. Any Indian found to be a cannibal could be enslaved. So were they really cannibals? No, there isn't any archaeological evidence anywhere that proves this. What happened is that they decided to make good Indian and a bad Indian. The Taino, which also means the good people, the Caribs, the bad people. But remember earlier I showed you how all the Caribbean had been interchanging and trading thousands of years before colonization? And we spoke different dialects of the Arawakian language in order to communicate with our relatives. In the history books you'll read how the Caribs came in fighting the Spaniards. It was our own people fighting against them. The Spaniards turned them into Caribs so they could enslave the folks that were rebelling. So they made up that cockamamie story about them being cannibals, just so they can go around that law. Now, in Puerto Rico, census made at the end of the 18th century in 1799 by order of Carlos III of Spain, there were 2,302 Taino Indians living in the central Cordillera, Puerto Rico Central Mountain Range. These places today are known by our people as La Indieras, Indian lands. In the year 1800, the term Indio or Indian was officially removed as a racial category from all Puerto Rican census reports. The category Color Pardos Libres was added, free people of color. Over 20,000 people in Puerto Rico identified themselves as American Indian in the 2010 US Census report. 49% increase in the number of island Puerto Ricans to do so. In 2000, the number was 13,336. So this organization, just really quickly, is the United Confederation of Taino People. We're the ones that do this census. And anyone that wants to become a member of United Confederation of Taino People to identify as Taino can go onto the site on uctp.org and download the form, fill it out, and send it in, and you become a member of UCTP. It is not a tribe, it is an organization, it is just identity, Taino identity. The U.S. Census Bureau recently released the 2010 data sets on American racial and ethnic origins in a report entitled Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics. The reporting is a culmination of the analysis, 350 million detailed responses to the race and ethnicity questions that were collected in the 2020 census. A significant population increase is noted, 85% from 2010 among American Indians, included the Indigenous Taino. the overall number of Americans claiming indigenous heritage increased from 5.2 million in 2010 to 9.6. That's amazing. So right here you see, that is my cacique, that is Cacique Mucaro Borrero Agüevana, Chief Owl. The new report from the U.S. Census Bureau indicates that they have finally taken our continuous requests seriously. Mucaro Agüevana Borrero, the current president of UCTP and Cacique Chief of Guaynia Taino Tribe, Borrero continued stating, we presented that what we view as the past discriminatory interpretations of the census data to the highest level of the Bureau. We also indicated our serious concerns with continued reports of field officers, census data collectors in Boriquén, Puerto Rico, who allegedly urged community members to identify themselves as white or told individuals that they could not identify as American Indian on the census. So now I'm concluding our presentation, and here is just some things that you may or may not recognize. Growing up, in your teen years, in your adult years, things that you notice, like hammocks, that's Taino made, it's indigenous. We use it in NASA. NASA used our ingenuity to be able to make those crafts and use hamacas inside their ships, so they, have a place to sleep and things like that. So they got that from us. Hamaca is a Taino word, it's not a Spanish word. Basket braiding, right here. Can anybody tell me what this is? Maraca. Now, why do you think it's called a maraca? So, maraca, the reason why it's called maraca is not because of its actual instrument, but it's the seed inside. It's called the maraca seed. So that is why it's called maraca. Here, everyone know what this is, right? It's a conch shell. So our people were fishermen as well, so they would fish and get the conch, pull out the meat, feed the families, and again, ingenuity, this is our cell phone. Okay, this is how we communicate. This is how we communicated from chiefdom to chiefdom when our men were fishing out in the sea, and you have the watchers up on the trees and up on the hills, and on the mountains. They can see from far away if there was a storm of brewing, and they would blow their shell any particular kind of way to let them know it was an alert, things like that. Intruders, the wife calling the husband, get your booty on back in the house, things like that. This is a macana, and this was used for various things. So what does it look like to you though? An oar, yes. So it was used as an oar in the canoa, and because of its pointy tip, they can spear the fish, and then if somebody got rowdy, there's now here, this is our mayowacan. This mayowacan is our log drum. It's our traditional log drum. And it's hollow in the inside. And it's usually carved with like an H. But there's more to that. Our depiction, we also have an indigenous animal. It's a frog, and it's called the coqui. And I'm sure people recognize that little sound of that coqui at nighttime. You can hear it, coqui, coqui. We can't sleep without it. Others are like, oh my gosh. But the depiction of the coqui is always like this. So because of that, they do that depiction. So for us, it's an H, but for us, it's the hooky. And it makes an amazing sound. Tataniki. You want to do a little demo of the Ayahuasca, please? I'll hold it, but you can just do a little demo so they can hear what it sounds like. Oh, sorry. All right. So it has little different various sounds. My chief plays that. I don't play it. So this is my tribal grandmother, and we love this quote because it's a powerful quote. The same way they wrote us out of history, we're writing ourselves back in. So that goes to that paper genocide. Everyone thinks that the Taino people are extinct. No, we're not. We're right here. My son's here. I have daughters. My daughter has children. As long as they keep spitting them out, we're still here. And now these are just photos from how we adapt our clothing. When you saw previous photos, you see that there was barely any clothing. Well, I mean, this is thousands and thousands of years ago. The temperature is like 80, 90 degrees. We didn't interchange with the colonizers as of yet, so we barely had anything. Now what you're seeing is adaptation. Like, we're adapting to our surroundings here. In Massachusetts, it's freezing. We need to put some clothes on. And also modesty. We're not gonna be in a powwow circle with nothing on. So that's why you see the different various types of regalia. This is my sister Claudia Foxtree, let me get that right, Dr. Claudia Foxtree, and her regalia. This is Tataniki, that's Vinny, he was so little, look how cute. And our different types of headdresses, let me just go to that. I create my own headdresses, I create my own regalia. Headdresses are very powerful, they're meaningful, they have energies depending on what type of bird you use. Mine are owl and red-tailed hawk with some Amazon and macaw, blue macaw. Over here you can see one of our elders doing pottery. Here, this is one of our tribal brothers. He's also an elder with our flag being flown at Standing Rock when there was the whole pipeline situation happening a few years back. And our indigenous family are also veterans. So here I am, little me, dancing. I had the honor of being part of the Puerto Rican Springfield Festival. I was an honoree there. Here I was just dancing at powwow, and my son actually that day on that first photo, he was awarded Warrior of the Year for our Taino community. Yes, you didn't go that day. Remember, you couldn't go? You did a whole video so they can see the video? How quickly we forget. So, like I was saying, our generation continues. This is my grandson. And he's 4 years old, and in his little regalia, and this is in New York. We travel all over the place representing our community and our culture. And we're just people just like you. So when you think you don't see someone Indigenous, you might just be speaking with someone Indigenous. So this concludes my presentation, this portion. Anyway, we're gonna get to do some little dancing right now. But I wanna thank you all for coming here. It was amazing. I really, really appreciate it. And in our language, hahom, thank you. And Seneko kakona han han katu, abundant blessings. This is the Mukaro dance in honor of my chief owl.
Mukaro, 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 Mukaro.
Right? Not yet. Oh, not yet. Okay. But he also doesn't want to be seen by the other tribe. So if he does get seen, then he has to, attack. And fight! was like, oh my gosh, it's happening, it's happening. Okay, so that was the sneak up. Thank you, Tata Nikki, that was amazing. And to conclude, I'm just going to close this space and I'm just going to do a gratitude prayer song because I am so grateful that you allowed me to come share my culture with you, and that means so much to me. And I hope that you all leave here with some new knowledge and know that I'm still here, we still exist, Indigenous peoples are here every single day, and whatever you could do to help and support Indigenous peoples. I have an event in Central Square, Cambridge that I've been working on for an entire year. It's Indigenous Peoples Day, Cambridge in Central Square, and it's on 65 Sydney Street, right, literally right off of Mass Ave at U Park, at University Park. A lot of Indigenous peoples from all across the Americas are going to be there, and they're going to be presenting and showing their cultures. There's going to be food and vendors, and it's free for everyone to come and enjoy, bring their children. So with that said, Ara koel güey, Ara koel güey, Hahom tamautia, Ara koel güey, Ara koel güey, Ara koel güey, Hahom tamautia, Ara koel güey, Bui arani, Bui kubi, Hahom tamautia, Ara koel güey. Abuelito sol, gracias por el día, mi abuelito sol. Tú eres la luz, tú eres medicina, mi abuelito sol. Abuelito sol, abuelito sol, gracias por el día, mi abuelito sol. Ahora